we're pleased to be joined by one of the biggest heavy hitters of the crew, Brett McMurphy, longtime ESPN writer and analyst before. But Brett, first of all, welcome to On Three. It's been great to have you on, and I know Sip and I were looking forward to getting a chance to talk to you here.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It's good to be with you guys. On Three has been incredible. Adding, I don't know about the heavy hitter, but I appreciate the compliment. But yeah, we're Shannon. Shannon does not like to stay still for very long. So yeah, he's been making some great additions, and it seems like every week there's somebody new's coming on board, or we're adding something to the business. But yeah, it's been incredible so far.
Well, I want to get right to this because it's kind of the story right now in the Big Ten for this week, the private equity story that we've all been following, and looks like there's two teams holding out, Michigan and USC. But the way it breaks down, there's different tier systems. Nebraska would be in that third tier, Oregon and USC in the second tier. Washington, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State would be in the top tier. What is your view on this private equity deal? And do you think there's a pretty good chance it's going to pass through here with the Big Ten schools?
Yeah, Sean, I don't really know about pretty good chance. I mean, to me, with no ties to the Big Ten, I'm thinking, why is the richest conference on the planet even going down this path? And I understand, financial opportunities, financial responsibilities has never been more paramount in college athletics than it is right now. But man, it just, to me, it smells like bad fish. And maybe I'm wrong on this. And now you've got the fact that you've got USC and Michigan, threatening, define the word threatening, take that for what it's worth, to, potentially leave the conference if this goes through. I knew the next 4 or 5 years were going to be very volatile because of the uncertainty going forward. All of the TV deals are up around 2030, 2031. That's prime time for realignment. So I thought we would see one more realignment splash, with obviously teams getting taken from the ACC to either the Big Ten or the SEC. But yeah, Sean, I honestly can't predict how I think this thing will go. I don't think it's simple. I think there's a lot of, probably there's, the Big Ten will say there's a lot of good to it. I think other people would say there's probably a lot of bad to this. But boy, man, I could see other conferences or teams getting a private equity, but it kind of surprised me when word first got out that it's the Big Ten, because they have the biggest TV deal, and now they're wanting to do private equity. I'll be fascinated to see where this ends up. But, this is certainly not college football that we all got into when we first started covering this several years ago. And where this ends up, who knows?
I'll tell you, Brett, Nebraska fans, they always want to hear what guys like you, national writers that assess the national scene for a living, think of Nebraska. They don't like that Nebraska is on the third tier of this plan. It kind of gets down to a little bit of Nebraska's status as a blue blood. How do you, Brett McMurphy, assess Nebraska's blue blood status right now?
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. Yes, I am a national reporter, Steve, but I am 1,000% biased on this. But I will give you my honest answer. I grew up in Oklahoma. I was a huge OU fan. Okay. I finally developed brains, and I went to Oklahoma State, got my degree from Oklahoma State, but I grew up an OU fan.
Right.
I lived and loved the OU-Nebraska rivalry back in the Big 8 days.
Okay.
I think Nebraska is one of the biggest brands out there. I think the reason nationally why they're not considered a national brand now is a lot of the advantages they had going back even to the 70s or the 80s. They were one of the few teams that were on television. Now everybody's on television, so that's gone away. I do think moving to the Big Ten hurt them recruiting wise, because now they're not dipping into the state of Texas like they did before. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing that has impacted Nebraska is they haven't had the success they had back in the glory days with Tom Osborne. And look, nobody's going to continue that kind of success. But I think probably longtime Husker fans are wondering, why are they looked at differently than back then? Well, obviously they haven't had the same amount of success. I think Nebraska, though, can get to that level and will get to that level once they get to the college football playoff, once they start having some success. I'm not talking about winning national titles as frequently as they did back with Tom Osborne. I just get to the playoff. And I talked to you guys off air a little bit about I do bowl projections. I think Nebraska will be one of the most highly sought after teams for the bowls because of the passionate fan base, because of the TV eyeballs that they will draw. And, the more that Matt wins, the more that they continue to have success there, that's going to increase. But until that happens, they are going to be behind the Ohio States on a national perception. They are going to be behind the Penn States and the Michigans. But when Nebraska wins to the level of those teams, and I guess take Penn State out of that mix because they've just made the one playoff berth, but when you start winning like the Ohio States and the Michigans, you've got the brand name, you've got the fan base, you've got everything else, then I think they will ascend to those levels. I was kind of surprised when you named the tiers on the private equity. I would have thought Nebraska certainly would have been tier 2 at the worst. But I do think they can get back there. I think, Steve, the only reason they're not is because they haven't won there. But, man, I'm a huge Nebraska fan. I loved watching those games every Thanksgiving. And that's one of my dream bowl projections is having OU Nebraska play, perhaps in Tampa at the ReliaQuest. You cannot play that game enough times as far as I'm concerned.
Beautiful.
Joined here by Brett McMurphy. Brett, the coaching carousel this year has been wild, and Nebraska was involved in at least for a week or two with Matt Rule and the Penn State rumors. Got 2 more years added to his contract. His buyout at Nebraska is now over $70 million with 8 years remaining on his contract now moving forward. What's your read on this Penn State job? I mean, does anybody know what direction they're going to go? And we thought maybe we'd see some of these buyouts toned down a little bit as we move into this revenue share of college football. It doesn't appear that's the case right now, as there are a lot of coaches like Matt Rule that are carrying these big numbers on their contracts now.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Everyone thought, look, I don't really agree with getting rid of coaches in season. I mean, if there's some kind of controversy brewing there, something behind the scenes, then make the move. I don't know what benefit Penn State got out of getting rid of James Franklin middle of the season. Would they be any different right now than if he was still there? Probably not. But you know what they did when they got rid of him? They let everybody know, hey, we're coming after your coach. So what happens? Matt gets a new deal. Kurt Cignetti gets a new deal at Indiana. Rhett Lashley at SMU, maybe more perhaps with some schools in the SEC that have openings. He got a new deal. So all they did was they alerted everybody that, hey, we need a new coach. And so the schools were able to lock up their guys. And you asked a great question, and I don't know the answer to this, but why did these schools still continue to give these monster deals? Like Cignetti, and look, he's earned every penny. He's got a 10-year deal. He's not going to be coaching for 10 years. So why do you give him a 10-year deal? The flip side is if Indiana said, hey, you know what, Kurt, you're compensated pretty good. We're not going to renew your deal. And then Penn State comes in and throws the gross national product of a small country at him, and he leaves Indiana for Penn State, then the Indiana fan base is going to go ballistic on the administration and the president. And how'd you let him leave? How'd you let him leave? So, basically these athletic directors and presidents, they've got, not one gun, but they've got 2 guns at their head. And if you don't keep a guy that's successful, the fan base is going to revolt on you. And so there's nothing they can do, but yet they continue to lock up these guys. And, since I'm talking about Indiana, it's like 6-6 or 5-7 the next 2 or 3 years. We're sticking by you, or we need to make a move. Who knows? But now you're locked into $92 million for the next decade. But yeah, I don't know, Sean. I don't know if we ever see a reset button, because I'm sure these schools and these ADs would love to do it, but the agents have all the control, the coaches have all the control, and I don't see that changing. Like a lot of things in college football, I don't think it's sustainable, but it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going until finally it blows up and they restart everything. But unfortunately or fortunately, depending on if you're an agent or a coach or a fan base, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Hey, Brett, I understand this question's speculative in nature, but how serious do you think Rule was as a Penn State candidate? Did you have any kind of read on that?
No, I don't. And this is just my opinion. I've talked to Matt before. I know Pat Craftwell. I have not asked them this specifically. I will after the season. Maybe I can get some truth serum. I think based on their relationship, again, my opinion, I think at some point they had a conversation, whether it was last month, whether it was last year, whenever it was, and basically discussed the possibility about Matt at some point reuniting with Pat at Penn State. And then I think they came to an agreement, whatever that was. Maybe they decided, again, this is just me, total speculation, because I know when people say stuff, then it gets out there. He's reporting this. I'm not reporting this.
Right.
I'm just saying, two guys that are really good friends, wouldn't you talk to that guy and say, hey, look, you're here, I'm here. Can we ever do this? We can't do this. Would we be able to do this? How would this work? I think maybe those conversations were had before Nebraska stepped up with the contract. I think that's probably realistic. Again, I'd love to ask both of these guys that question after the season. Maybe they would share that. So I think that is more likely, Steve, that something like that may have happened. Mm-hmm. But I do believe if they had decided, yes, it's a possibility, then like Matt decided to stay at Nebraska, Kiffin's got to decide what in the world he's going to do. Money, I think, even though they keep getting these big contracts, I don't think money has a lot to do with these decisions. I really don't, because you're going to get your money wherever you're going to go. Maybe it's at 1 or 2 million less. Okay, I'll take a hit. I'll take one for the team. I think it's more personal preference. Where do you feel more comfortable at? What's the best fit? And also what the situation is. Where can I win long-term? What's the best access to the playoff? Some people are saying, well, if Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, he can go 8-4 and he doesn't have to worry about getting fired. Uh-huh. I guarantee you the last thing Lane Kiffin is thinking about is what school can I go to so I won't get fired? He's thinking, what school can I go to win a national championship, to get to the college football playoff, to be able to access and recruit players at the highest level? Now, what that answer is, I don't know. We'll certainly find out. So I think it's probably the same thing with Matt. He looked at Nebraska and said, look, I can do everything I want to do here at Nebraska, so I'm going to stay here. There's no reason to chase it and go somewhere else.
Hey, Brett, as we wrap it up here, I wanted to ask you this. Nebraska's running back Emmett Johnson leads Power 4 in rushing right now, leads the Big Ten, obviously. The Huskers have not had an All-American since 2011, their first year in the Big Ten Conference. Size up Johnson's chances. I know you're big on these award committees. I think he's got a chance to at least make the Doak Walker finals, maybe win the award. I mean, what do you know about Emmett Johnson? Does he make even the conversations in your world right now at the national level when you size up for some of these honors and awards?
Yeah, he certainly does. And what's unfortunate is for a lot of people that vote on these things, they kind of translate to how good the team that somebody's on.
Right.
If Nebraska, if you have Iowa at the end of the year, can finish, you can win out, you could split, whatever happens. And that's unfortunate. And so how Nebraska finishes, I think Iowa's obviously a standalone game, a lot of eyeballs on that. If he has a monster game, certainly he, increases his chances to be an All-American. I think he would have a great shot. Certainly you lead the nation in rushing. You should have a legit chance to get it. A lot of times you don't. I'll give you a comparison, and this is not to be detrimental to Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, but his numbers, his numbers alone are not that impressive. But obviously, anyone that's seen him play knows what a talent he is. So, will he be an All-American at wide receiver? Probably, but there's probably I don't know, have the stats in front of me. Is there a dozen guys that have better receiving numbers than have more receptions, have more yards, etc.? So it's not simply a stat-based driven award system. I won't go off on my rant on the Heisman, but specifically for running backs, I do think they do play a lot more into statistics, and they're more comparable. So I think he would have a great shot. I would be shocked, again, if he continues what he's done up to this point. The Iowa game, standalone game, for a lot of people that maybe haven't had the chance to see Nebraska play, that'll be a chance to see him play against a very highly regarded Iowa defense. I think that would rubber stamp it if he came up and the Huskers came up big against the Hawkeyes.
There could be a massive Big Ten title game, maybe the most massive we've seen. Ohio State, Indiana. Who would you pick right now?
Well, I would argue it's not that massive.
Oh, come on.
What, the losers the loser gets a first round bye. The winner and the loser are both in the top 4 of the college football playoff. I agree with massive as far as 2 undefeated teams. But yeah. Steve, if we went back to the 14 playoff, I'd agree with you 1,000,000,000%. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I'm kind of torn on this 12-team playoff. I don't know about you guys. I like it that they're inviting more people to the dance. But it also takes away from I agree. 12-0 versus 12-0, 1 versus 2. Mm-hmm. Has it happened before? Massive game, but the loser of the game, okay, you're not the 1 seed, you're maybe the 3 seed in the playoff. But I do like Ohio State. As much as I respect what Cignetti's done at Indiana, it's still like, man, I know they wanted Oregon, but I know they beat Iowa. They came from behind at Penn State. I still, the non-conference schedule, they beat the hell out of everybody. I give them credit for that. But they still don't play as many quality teams. And I just wonder, with the exception of Oregon, they haven't fared well in those games. They lost to Ohio State last year. They lost to Notre Dame in the playoff. Both of those games were not as close as the final score. Is this year different? We'll have to find out. But ultimately, Steve, I think Ohio State will take care of business against Indiana. But it doesn't matter. Ohio State won the national championship last year. They didn't even get to the Big Ten title game. But that's one of the weird things now with the conference championship games, specifically with the SEC and the Big Ten, is the loser of these games are still getting into the playoff. That certainly won't be the case in the Big 12 or the ACC. But I kind of hate that. I kind of liked when, there were consequences when you lost a game. Now it's like, oh, what? I'm not a 5 seed. I'm a 7 seed. Okay, right. Well, let's see what happens.
I hear you.
Well, Brett,
I agree with you. It's just it's just different because of the expanded playoff.
Well, Brett, we appreciate the time from you here on a Friday and hope you've got a great weekend of college football on tap.
You got it, man. I'm looking forward to it. And, I'm glad to put on my resume that I saved the OU Nebraska series once in a blue moon ago, for those that remember.
No, I agree. I mean, it would be like the Big Ten saying, "Oh, Michigan and Ohio State don't play." I mean, the Nebraska-Oklahoma series was every bit as big as Michigan-Ohio State is right now. And because OU had about a 5 or 6 year period where they weren't relevant, when they went to the Big 12, they just said, "Hey, we're not going to play Nebraska anymore," because Nebraska was ranked number 1 and OU was not relevant at that point. And Tom Osborne has told me that was a huge regret that they got rid of that series. Like, that never should have happened when the Big 12 formed. It was a valuable piece of real estate that still should exist in college football.
I agree. Absolutely. But yeah, appreciate you guys. Looking forward to the rest of the year and, see what surprises lie ahead.